Here's a question. We have been told that RECs cannot be used to offset Scope 2 electricity emissions on the corporate level. Could you address this, please?
Sure. This is Jennifer Giles. Our program allows for Scope 2 emissions to be matched with renewable energy certificates, and that's also the policy of the EPA Green Power Partnership Program and other environmental leaders such as WRI. So it's a generally accepted practice, and that we don't foresee that changing.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, in addition to EPA's Green Power Partnership, which allows you to buy renewable energy certificates to pair with your energy use, EPA's Climate Leaders Program has a renewable energy protocol specifically for Scope 2 reporting that dictates how you can use renewable energy, either electricity or renewable energy certificate purchases to offset Scope 2. And as Jennifer mentioned, World Resources Institute general guidance about how to report Scope 2 includes specific guidance about how to use renewable energy purchases, including renewable energy certificates or renewable electricity products to offset Scope 2. Okay, and we're getting a question from right here in the room, just to talk a little bit about what Scope 2 is for those of you who are deep into corporate greenhouse gas reporting. The World Resources Institute, I guess, is one of the main sources of these terms. They, in collaboration with many stakeholders here in the U.S. and internationally, have developed pretty much what is globally accepted as the framework for how entities can assess their greenhouse gas footprint. Scope 1 is the term that's used to refer to greenhouse gas emissions that you as a business or as an individual contribute directly. So if you are burning fossil fuels on site, those emissions that you're directly responsible for are considered Scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions are emissions that you're responsible for but weren't generated on the premises, and it's mainly focused on electricity use. So when you buy electricity and use it in your business or in your home, your Scope 2 emissions are the emissions that are associated with the production of the electricity that you use. And Scope 3, the third scope, is emissions that are associated with other things that you use in your business that aren't directly emitted by you on site or associated with your electricity use. So you might include air travel, business commuting, everything else that your business does that has greenhouse gases associated with it. Products that you buy, inputs to your supply chain that had emissions associated with them when they were manufactured.
And of course, that's one of the things that Climate Earth is very focused on,
right.
The Scope 3 part, the embedded carbon in products and supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch of other questions here. We do have a question that's about the international scene. What do you plan, or how do you plan to educate and penetrate emerging markets like India and China to invest in and use RECs? And is there something that can be done to take the lead in developing widespread use of RECs in those developing economies?
Yeah. Right now, the REC market is focused in the United States and Canada. It's very well developed here. We have a lot of infrastructure behind it that's both the renewable energy tracking systems and fairly well developed in electricity regulation and generation reporting, both at the state level and the federal level. That whole set of infrastructure doesn't exist in pretty much most developing countries. The Greening program currently isn't working to develop certification programs in these countries, although we're interested in it. We've had some preliminary discussions, mainly with industries located in India who are multinational companies who in their U.S. operations use renewable energy or renewable energy certificates to address the environmental footprint of their electricity use, and they'd like to be able to do that in their overseas operations. But we're only in the very early stages of talking to them and thinking about how we might be able to develop markets to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, and it's the challenge. Part of the challenge with that is that every country has a different policy on how they treat renewable energy. So we have RPS here, but in other parts of the world, they don't view it as RPS. We're definitely interested in expanding renewable energy use internationally. I mean, to the extent that we can with Greenie, and we continue to have discussions about that and work with some of the purchasers that are in Greenie marketplace to figure out a way to account for their international manufacturing with their renewable energy strategies.
I'm going to pick up a question here about the Waxman-Markey bill. The question is, how would Waxman-Markey or other cap-and-trade programs affect the REC market? Could RECs be used as carbon offset credits?
I guess I'll start out by talking about the one cap-and-trade program that actually exists in the United States. Waxman-Markey isn't defined yet, and then talk about some different possibilities as we move forward. So many of you may know that in the northeastern United States, there's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap-and-trade program similar in structure to what's being talked about at the federal level, but it's only for the electricity sector. The way that cap-and-trade is implemented in the Northeast and is being expected to be implemented nationally is that a level of CO2 emissions is established as the allowable level, and then emission permits or allowances are either sold or given out to polluters, and over time the amount of these allowances decreases. So as the number of allowances that are given out over time decreases, emissions will go down. The big question is, how does renewable energy play into cap-and-trade? With this type of cap-and-trade design, and it's not the only type possible, but it looks like what we're going to have, renewable energy has very little or impact on the overall level of emissions coming from the economy unless there are specific measures put into the design that make adjustments based on renewable energy generation. And this comment would apply to energy efficiency investments as well. So once the level of the cap is set and the trajectory of declining allowances is plotted out, you could build tons of new renewable energy and make many, many investments in energy efficiency, or none, and it won't affect the amount of allowances that are given out. So the bare bones version of this type of regulation basically removes renewable energy and energy efficiency from being effective tools for reducing emissions from the levels set under the cap. However, if you look at what the regulators did when they set up the RGGI initiative in the Northeast, is they said, hey, wait a minute, we've got this really vibrant voluntary market for renewable energy that's been here for a decade. That's helping to finance new renewable energy facilities in addition to what the states are requiring for RPS. And one of the main motivators that individuals and companies are buying renewable energy is because they want to make a difference for the environment and they want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So what the RGGI states decided to do was to look at how much renewable energy was being purchased by the voluntary market and convert that to tons of CO2 and remove those amount of allowances from the pot of available allowances. So basically, they are allowing voluntary renewable energy purchasers to reduce the level of the cap and have a direct impact on reducing CO2 emissions from the electricity sector. California, who's also pretty far advanced in discussions about establishing a cap-and-trade here in the state, is going through discussions right now to figure out if they're going to do something like that too within the California cap-and-trade. So in December, the California Air Resources Board issued their scoping plan for how the cap-and-trade will be implemented, and it included the fact that they wanted to consider how to address the voluntary renewable energy market when they come out with the exact regulations. And they've already had one set of hearings and a bunch of comments filed by interested parties on how to move forward with this. And we know there's nothing currently in the Waxman-Markey bill about the voluntary renewable energy market, but behind the scenes there are many entities who are talking to congressional committees and staffers about the voluntary renewable energy market and how to ensure that once CAP comes into place nationally, that voluntary purchasers can still make a difference by buying renewable energy.